Well, hi everyone. Good morning, afternoon, and evening. I know folks are watching from all over the world, so very excited to have you all with us today. I'm Amee Parbhoo. I'm the managing partner of Accion Venture Lab. We're a leading early stage fund focused on fintech for inclusion. I'm very excited to have this conversation with Michelle Gethers today. Michelle is Visa's Chief Diversity Officer and Head of Corporate Responsibility. We're on the clock, so I want to get as much time with Michelle as I can and dig right into things. Maybe just as some context setting, the purpose of this conversation, I mean, we know that low-income families around the world face the most severe effects of economic instability, climate change, migration, really so many of the challenges in the world. Visa has been at the forefront of harnessing fintech innovation to unlock customer-centric, locally relevant solutions that can strengthen financial resilience for these communities. And we at Accion Venture Lab are particularly grateful for Visa's support. So, Michelle, maybe just to kick things off, I'd love to hear from you more about how investing in and growing fintech startups, locally led fintech innovations fit into Visa's strategy.
Thank you, Amee. So first, thank you for having me, but also fintechs remind us that a digital economy is the new normal. And the reality is often we believe that people who might be seemingly have less money don't need access to financial services, but everyone needs to move money, whether you're going to the grocery store, whether you're getting your pay, whether you're a buyer or a seller. So when we think about it almost as a basic need, that everybody needs to be able to participate. And what we've got to move to is a mindset of inclusion. So our innovation is around who is not at the table. And how do we bring them to the table? So it's a matter of using technology to call people in so they can have agency over how they receive and distribute their money. And we know that innovation is everywhere around the world. They're in small corners of every community. Someone's thinking about, how do I buy? How do I sell? And how do I get currency to move? And fintechs are the solution. You know, it's no longer going to the corner store per se and pulling out coins. It's really going to be about using this innovation for good and for inclusion is how we think about it.
Yeah, no, that very much resonates with what we're seeing as well, and just kind of this, rise of digitization of digital financial services, particularly from the pandemic, is something we aren't going to go back from. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Maybe if you could talk a little bit more about the locally led piece of that, and how Visa thinks about, especially given the global nature of Visa's business, what does it mean to be locally led?
Yeah, so the reality is fintech and money movement is local. It really is about, how do I, as a small business and a nano business, maybe it's just me, maybe it's just a few of us as a micro business, and especially in this gig economy. So we know that decisions are local, money movement is local, trust is local. And often on a fintech platform, it's about distributing your trust. So how does trust come into this localization of how I will leverage my dollar? Growing up myself in the financial services sector, I worked in risk management, I worked in finance, I worked in operations, and now I'm on the social impact side. And so I've traveled the world to see what local is. I don't sit in North America suggesting that I understand what is needed in Nigeria, or what is needed in Singapore, or what is needed in Paris, or what is needed in Mexico City or Brazil. So I've been to these places so that I can fully understand the needs of the local economy, because the reality is economies are really local.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. When we were prepping a few days ago, you raised a really powerful framework and approach that's been guiding your work both at Visa and honestly, it sounds like before Visa. So maybe you can work in a bit of that background because I think it is such a powerful story. But could you share more about when you called the two-gen approach? What does that mean, and how are you seeing that applied in financial health and in education?
Yeah. So a couple of things. We know that people are not born and then walk home from the hospital. They're tethered to an adult. And we often know that when we start to disaggregate communities, we know that when a mother lives in poverty, statistically, that means her children will live in poverty. It is not discounting the power of men in our communities or homes, but we know when mom is in poverty and gives birth, her children are subject to that same poverty. And often the ecosystem works with one person in a household. It does not think about household-based solutions. It thinks about people and individual-based solutions.
Mm.
And my experience and the globalization of my experience tells me that that is an error.
Yeah.
We need solutions that are proximate to the household. So I used to say, and I currently say, that the definition of insanity is giving a child resources and sending them home to chaos.
Mm.
It is equally a definition of insanity to ask the adults in the household to become gainfully employed with no childcare or resources for their children while they're at work. Another definition of insanity. So when I think about, and as we're discussing the brave new world of financial inclusion and calling people in, it requires us to say, what are the needs of the household? What is the composition of the household? Amee, we both know that there's a sandwich generation where we are taking care of the elderly in our home and taking care of our children at the same time in the same household. And that legacy is a good legacy. But how do we make it work so that people can see their way out of poverty or out of circumstances that do not allow them to buy, sell, and save? Because everybody needs to be able to do those three things. So a two-generational approach would suggest, how do we do financial inclusion for a child? And some would say children have no money, but what children have is the capacity to learn and to learn about money so that they are ready when the time comes. And they can think about their behavior inside of the household because now they understand money. The same is true for the adults in the household. How do we help adults recognize the value of money? And when you do that, what you then have is an ecosystem inside that household where everybody's pushing forward with a degree of knowledge that allows them to say, we understand our circumstances, and we also understand collectively how we can lift ourselves from our circumstances. So at Visa, Our purpose is to uplift everyone everywhere by being the best way to pay and be paid. And the reason why uplift everyone everywhere is there is because we believe we must do good. We
Mm.
must do good in order to do well. So the two-generational approach, if you apply fintech, who's more computer literate in the world? Our children. We're always asking them to do something. Why not teach them through these fintechs and organizations like Visa and like yours, who are saying financial inclusion is important? And if I can, for a moment, just pause and say, and financial inclusion is about education, yes, but it is also about access.
Mm.
Then it's digital access. And then it's about affordability. Everyone can't afford the same use case. And then it's about usage. How do I apply my knowledge? I often say that knowledge is not power unless you put it to use.
Right.
And so it's this idea that we're going to do that education so we can get it to use.
Mm. Yeah, and I think that's been so much of the learnings in the financial inclusion spaces, right? Education by itself, it hasn't actually been proven to be too effective, right? It needs to
Right.
be, I'd be curious kind of learnings, or are there maybe any examples of programs that you could give of, how that application of education with then, as you said, access, affordability, usage, kind of how you've seen those kind of come together in a way, because I think this, the two-gen approach is really powerful.
Yeah. So not 30 days ago, we were in the Navajo Nation and with the Navajo Nation. And we went there for digital empowerment to address the digital divide. We also understood that the children were in school. So we went to school to talk about financial education so that they could start developing the concepts of money and gamify it so that they could play games and answer questions about money and then advance the football or advance the soccer ball down the field. And you make it fun because there's vocabulary that's important, because one thinks that someone knows the difference between a liability and an asset, or what is insurance, what is debit versus credit, what is it to save versus invest. So we spend time with these core elements of education with children, but then we also went to the adults in the community. And we said, you are running a small business. Let us give you tools so that you can think about not just the day-to-day transaction, but how do you harness enough of that to create savings so that you can build for your future and your children's future. So we literally do it. We took computers and gave them computers and said, you now have digital access. It is yours, no charge. We work with another nonprofit called IT, Human IT, and they provide 1 year of a help desk. They make sure that any questions that they have are answered. So it's about having proximate solutions, but holistic solutions that can be applied. So can you imagine that 6-year-old coming home from school now and saying, today we learned about money, and the parent saying, so did I? Let's talk about it. And let me help you understand what I do in my small business in the nation. So that's one example, and we are trying to do that all over the world. We've done that in Canada and Toronto to newcomers in the community, and it was very well received. The Minister of Finance came, so it's about making sure the ecosystem is not one and done, but it's about community coming together, and that when a Visa might leave for example, the Navajo Nation that day, the learning still keeps going and
And
the
maybe,
connection keeps going.
oh, sorry. No, that's great. Yeah, no, and that kind of ties to actually a question we just got in the chat, and I'll make that also a call. If others have questions, please do drop them in the chat, and happy to take them. But one question we got was, how do you see the difference, or how does Visa see the difference between financial education and just marketing? And how do you distinguish between that? Because I think there is a concern sometimes education can be seen as potentially condescending,
Yes.
and that marketing, if it leans toward actually marketing, it's leaning toward actually a set of products or services rather than kind of the holistic needs that individual would be. So how does Visa, make think about that, and differentiate between the two?
Yeah, so I want the audience to know, and Amee, I want you to know too, that when we actually do financial education, we don't actually brand it. We're not going in as Visa. Yeah, I work for Visa, but our financial education actually doesn't have our brand on it. So it's not our desire to market, it's our desire to share our humanity and for people to know that there are no elementary questions. There are no questions that are not smart. Every question is smart. And every question ladders up to a greater outcome. So we differentiate, and we're very intentional about it because we understand that we might look like technically we're a fintech company that is bringing people on board. What we want to bring people on board to is participation in the financial ecosystem, because when you don't participate, you get higher costs and you can get negative outcomes because you don't know. So we are firm believers in the segment of the business that I'm responsible for, that communities are better when they're educated and they understand what the financial ecosystem is. And we do not introduce product when we are talking to people.
Got it. That's great to hear. Well, I guess, would love to kind of dig into then your call to fintechs. I mean, what would you love to see kind of fintech companies doing more that's aligned with the 2Gen approach, that's aligned with kind of this financial education in a holistic way? What's your call to anyone in the space right now listening?
So a couple of things. I'm a woman who grew up in generational poverty. I know what it means to not have. I also know what it means to have. I also know that there's a difference between saving money and wealth. I also know the difference between a APR. I know the difference between an interest-bearing account, etc. So my call to action is really to be in service to each other across all platforms. Because when we are in service to each other, you actually get better outcomes over time. And so I would just want to invite the fintech universe to the table. You provide a perfect forum for the fintech universe to come together and say, what are the things that we should consider as job one as we think about the number of people who are excluded? I don't call it unbanked. I call it just simply not in the formal financial services ecosystem. Because whether we want to talk about it or not, there is an informal financial ecosystem. And sometimes that informal system is not advantageous to the users of that system. And so I would like for just everything to be above board, and that we figure out what true financial inclusion looks like. Because as you shared, and I know, COVID taught us something about excluding people from systems. And it even had to do with how some kids were educated or not educated, how some people got access to food and some people did not. So it's not that the world has a shortage of knowledge, information, and capabilities. It's how we distribute it. So I'm asking, yes, that we adopt this idea in the fintech space that we've got to be in service to families and households and individuals that are excluded, but also that we think about as we bring them in, that we bring them in a way that allows them to be successful. So that's my call to action. Get involved. Everybody should be in. And then how do we help people ladder up?
That's great. Who inspires you? What gives you, I mean, it's difficult watching the news, particularly in the last few weeks with everything going on. But what gives you hope? Where do you find hope about the world?
You know, I'm going to tell you, when you come from humble beginnings and someone gives you a chance who doesn't look like you, who didn't know my story, but they gave me a chance. They saw something in me that I could not see in myself. I didn't know how I was going to go to college. I didn't know how I was going to pay. You know, my mom said to me, I don't know what college is, and I've never been there. But I know that people who go there wind up being successful. And so I walk with that as part of who I am. And so what inspires me is giving someone else an opportunity. When people ask me my greatest accomplishment in corporate America, and I really mean this, it's watching someone that I hired get promoted. And when I see them get that first VP job, it brings me tremendous joy because I remember when I got my first VP job. And I remember, and I won't forget, a gentleman named Philip Reese. And I thanked him. And you know what he said to me? He said, I didn't promote you. You were already a vice president. I just made it official. So that is my long way of saying that the eyes of children inspire me. Because a child always has hope and they're always looking beyond. And when I look at a child, I say, I can do this for them. I can do this. I want to do this for them.
That's great. Yeah, no, there's I think just so much to use that kind of frame for thinking of the ways in which we want to solve big challenges like change. I mean, when you look at it through the eyes of children versus just ourselves, I think a lot there. What gives you hope?
Yeah, so I know hope is a really tough word right now when we look at world events. I do believe that we have to believe in something greater than ourselves. So I get the pleasure of being around solution-minded people who are looking not just for themselves, but looking at how do I do something that is going to make a meaningful difference in the world. So I have hope because the world is borderless. We can connect with anybody, anytime through multiple different channels. That brings me hope that we can also get solutions into corners of the world where people feel isolated. It also brings me hope that we can have a forum like this and it not be about profitability, but it's about humanity. It's about community. It's about holistic solutions. It's about this can-do attitude, and we will. So it brings me hope that women are getting seats at tables around the world from all walks of life, that we're opening the aperture to people who don't look like us, don't talk like us, don't think like us. So that brings me a tremendous amount of hope that it is possible. And so this word of possibility, and my faith tells me that all things are possible. So I just live my life that anything's possible.
Mm. And I want to open it up again for anyone listening for questions from you all. I'm getting a couple here. I got one from a colleague at Accion. You know, one thing that's been really important for us at Accion Venture Lab and at Accion more generally has been obviously kind of the role of DEI, diversity. We are
Yes.
spending a lot of time on my team thinking about just the gender lens to investing, and thinking about, you know, when you look at fintech founders and who's starting companies, it's still not very diverse. It's not, I mean, we know the stats of, you know, less than 3% of capital in the US venture money going to women. You know, for global fintech, it's, you know, the numbers don't look great. And so I'd love to hear more about, and the question is more around Visa's work in DEI, and how you think about kind of diversity as it relates to kind of fintech founders and your own staff.
Yeah. So it starts with this idea that for me, I&D work is about valuing the unique identity and contributions of everyone everywhere so that we can all reach our full potential. So I'm a firm believer that often we think about I&D work as counting the number of people at the table who look a certain way, whether it's women, people of color, people with different faith, people from my LGBTQ plus community. And when we look at it superficially and only look at the head count, we miss the value proposition, which is my identity associated with how I contribute. So at Visa, we are looking at, yes, we want the table to be dressed with people from all walks of life because of their contribution, because we understand that we're a microcosm of community, so that when we sit at a table, we uniquely understand the cultural significance of the work that we do, of how people will receive the solution. So I&D work for me is about more so inclusion, because if it's only diversity and I'm not included, then what do we have anyway? So it is allowing people to have voice and feel value throughout all ecosystems, fintech, Visa, community, it doesn't matter. So we really have an emphasis on inclusion. And we also believe that inclusive leadership is important. So it's not about what Michelle is doing, it's about what the ecosystem is doing inside the corporation. Every leader taking responsibility for this idea of including everyone so that you get the richness of our diversity, right? Because it's really about inclusion is deriving the benefit of diversity. And I think that's really important. You're on mute, Amee.
There we go. No, that frame across all different levels of work. I mean, for us, when it comes to the boards of fintech companies, when it comes to founders of companies, the diversity of the workforce, the end customer, I think it's important to think about that so everyone is included at various levels.
Yeah, and making those impact investments, right? Because often we say, I don't invest in women-led or underrepresented led fintechs because they don't make as much money as others. That's not true. It's not true.
Right.
And so we're doing some of that work. I'm proud to say we're making investments so that we can show the way.
That's great. No, that's so important. And again, grateful for Visa's support and everything we do, and for the work that you're doing in the market. But super, thank you, Michelle, so much for this conversation and for the insights. And thank you, everyone who's been listening. Really appreciate your time and for the conversation.
Thank you, Amee. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Take care. Bye.
Be well. Bye.
You too. Bye.